Waitress who insulted Clint Eastwood didn't know he owned the restaurant. That was the kind of shift Mia was having. One of those endless days when everything seemed to go wrong. The coffee machine sputtered to a halt just as the morning rush hit. The new busboy quit halfway through his first shift, and her manager was nowhere to be found. To top it all off, she had been assigned to the outdoor section, where the scorching afternoon sun made every table feel like it was sitting in the middle of a desert. By the time the man in the baseball cap and sunglasses sat down at one of her tables, Mia's patience was hanging by a thread. The man didn't look like much, just another tourist in a well-worn leather jacket. He had that relaxed, unbothered air about him, like he didn't have a single care in the world. Mia, on the other hand, was dealing with plenty. Her apron was stained with spilled marinara sauce, her feet ached from running back and forth all day, and she still hadn't eaten since breakfast. So when the man waved her over with a casual flick of his hand, she forced a tight smile and walked over, ready to get this interaction over with as quickly as possible. "Menus on the table," she said, not bothering to hide the weariness in her voice. "Let me know when you're ready to order." The man looked up at her, his face partially obscured by the brim of his hat. "Actually, I already know what I want," he said in a slow, deliberate tone. His voice was low and gravelly, with a hint of something familiar, though Mia couldn't quite place it. "Great," she replied, pulling out her notepad. "What'll it be?" "I'll take the house special," he said, his lips curving into a faint smile. "And maybe a recommendation for something to drink." Mia sighed inwardly. She didn't have time for small talk or playing sommelier. "House special comes with a side salad," she said flatly. "As for drinks, we've got iced tea, soda, beer. Take your pick." The man chuckled softly, and for a moment, Mia thought she saw a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Iced tea's fine," he said. "And don't worry, I'll try not to take up too much of your time." Something about his tone rubbed her the wrong way. Was he mocking her? Did he think she was just some waitress who didn't know how to do her job? Mia clenched her teeth and jotted down his order, resisting the urge to snap back. She didn't have the energy for a confrontation, not today. When she brought out his food a few minutes later, the man was sitting back in his chair, watching the world go by as if he had all the time in the world. He thanked her with a polite nod and dug into his meal, but Mia barely acknowledged him. She had other tables to worry about, and she wasn't about to waste her time catering to someone who clearly thought he was better than everyone else. It wasn't until he asked for the check that Mia's frustration boiled over. He'd flagged her down with the same nonchalant wave, as if she were at his beck and call, and when she brought him the bill, he handed her a credit card without even glancing at the total. "You're welcome," she said sarcastically as she turned to leave, unable to keep the bitterness out of her voice. "Excuse me?" the man called after her, his tone sharp. Mia froze, her stomach twisting in knots. Had he heard her? She turned back slowly, bracing herself for whatever came next. "I think you've got me all wrong," he said, taking off his sunglasses. For the first time, Mia got a clear look at his face, and her heart sank. She knew that face. Everyone did. It was Clint Eastwood. Mia felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment as the weight of her mistake hit her. She had just insulted Clint Eastwood, one of the most iconic actors and directors of all time. But that wasn't the worst part, because what Clint said next would change everything. Mia's mind raced as Clint Eastwood's unmistakable face came into focus. For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped spinning. The restaurant around her, the clinking of plates, the murmur of other diners, the distant hum of the kitchen, faded into the background. All she could think about was how badly she'd just messed up. This wasn't just a random customer. This was Clint Eastwood. The man behind some of the greatest movies ever made. A living legend, and she had been rude to him. He tilted his head slightly, his piercing eyes narrowing as if he were studying her. "You seem surprised," he said, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made Mia's throat tighten. She stammered, struggling to find words. Her confidence, which had already been shaky after a long day, was now completely shattered. "I didn't realize. I didn't know it was you." Clint leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Does that matter?" he asked simply. Mia swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Of course it mattered. Didn't it? She wasn't sure anymore. All she knew was that her heart was pounding, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just ruined what little chance she had at redeeming her day, or her job. I'm sorry, she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to be rude. Clint didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached for his glass of iced tea, taking a slow sip as he seemed to consider her apology. The silence stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. Mia's palms grew sweaty as she waited for him to say something, anything, that would break the tension. Finally, he set the glass down and looked at her. You've had a rough day, he said, his tone softer now, almost understanding. Mia blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, I guess you could say that. He nodded, as if he already knew. It's not easy, working in a place like this, he said, gesturing vaguely at the restaurant around them. Long hours, demanding customers, not a lot of appreciation. Mia wasn't sure whether to agree or feel embarrassed that he'd seen right through her. It's just one of those days, she said, trying to sound casual. But that doesn't excuse the way I treated you. I really am sorry. Clint's lips curved into a faint smile, and for a moment, she thought he might let it go, but then he said something that made her stomach drop. You know, this isn't just any restaurant, he said, his voice carrying a hint of something she couldn't quite place. I actually have a personal connection to it. Mia frowned, confused. What do you mean? Clint leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. I own it. The words hit her like a ton of bricks. Her mouth fell open, but no sound came out. She had no idea what to say, or even what to think. She'd been working here for nearly 6 months, and had never once heard that Clint Eastwood was the owner. How was that even possible? You, she started, then stopped, shaking her head in disbelief. You own this place? Clint nodded, his expression serious. I bought it a few years ago. It's a small operation, but I like it that way. Gives me a chance to meet people, see how they're doing. Mia felt like the ground had been pulled out from under her. Not only had she been rude to a customer, but she also insulted her boss. The asterisk boss. Her mind raced as she tried to process the implications. Was she about to get fired? Would he tell the manager? Would he make a scene in front of the other diners? But Clint didn't seem angry. If anything, he looked amused. You didn't know, he said, almost as if to himself. I can see that, but I'm curious. Why'd you snap at me like that? What's really going on? Maya hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. She didn't want to come off as unprofessional, but at the same time, she couldn't deny that she was at her breaking point. Finally, she decided to be honest. It's just been one of those days, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Nothing's gone right since I walked in the door, and I guess I took it out on you. I'm really sorry. Clint studied her for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough, he said. But you know, how you handle those bad days says a lot about you, more than the good days ever will. Mia bit her lip, feeling a mix of shame and gratitude. She couldn't tell if he was lecturing her or trying to teach her something, but either way, his words hit home. She nodded slowly, not trusting herself to speak. Tell you what, Clint said, standing up and placing his sunglasses back on. Why don't we call this a learning experience? I'm not going to hold it against you, but I hope you'll remember it the next time you're having a rough day. Mia's heart lifted slightly, though the embarrassment still lingered. Thank you, she said softly. I really appreciate that. Clint gave her a small smile and reached for his wallet. He pulled out a few bills and placed them on the table, far more than the cost of his meal. And for the record, he added, the house special was great. With that, he walked out, leaving Mia standing there stunned. She watched as he disappeared down the street, her mind still reeling from everything that had just happened. But as she turned back to clear the table, she noticed something tucked under the edge of the plate. A handwritten note on the back of a napkin. To read, don't let the bad days win. You're better than that. Mia felt a lump rise in her throat as she stared at the note. In that moment, she realized that this wasn't just another bad day. It was a day she'd never forget, but little did she know, the story wasn't over yet. Mia tucked the napkin into her pocket, her fingers trembling slightly as she cleared the table. Clint Eastwood had not only forgiven her, but he had left her with a piece of advice that felt deeply personal. It was surreal. Moments ago, she had been wallowing in frustration, convinced the day couldn't get any worse. Now, she couldn't stop replaying his words in her mind. Asterisk, don't let the bad days win. Asterisk, it was simple, yet it hit her in a way she couldn't explain. As the evening rush began, Mia found herself moving through the motions with a renewed sense of focus. She smiled at customers, checked in on her tables more often, and even cracked a joke or two with the kitchen staff. It wasn't that her problems had magically disappeared, but something inside her had shifted. Clint's words lingered in her mind, a reminder that she had the power to control how she responded to challenges. But the night held one more surprise for her. As she was tidying up after the last customers had left, her manager, Donna, walked over with a puzzled look on her face. "Hey, Mia," she said, holding out a folded piece of paper. "This was left at the hostess stand for you. Some guy dropped it off." Mia's heart skipped a beat as she took the paper. She unfolded it carefully, her hands trembling as she read the handwritten note inside. Asterisk Mia, asterisk. Asterisk, I meant what I said earlier. Bad days don't define you. But I also know how tough this job can be, and I admire the work you're doing here. You've got grit, and that's something not everyone has. Keep at it, asterisk. Asterisk O. And if you're ever looking for something new, give me a call. I think you'd fit right in with my team, asterisk. Asterisk best, asterisk. Asterisk Clint, asterisk. Underneath his name was a phone number and an address. Mia's eyes widened as she read it. The address wasn't for the restaurant, it was for a production office. Clint Eastwood's production office. The realization hit her like a wave. He wasn't just being kind earlier. He had seen something in her, something she hadn't even seen in herself. And now he was offering her an opportunity she couldn't have imagined in her wildest dreams. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at the note. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. Could this really be happening? Did he actually mean it? And if he did, was she brave enough to take the leap? She didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just another bad day. It was the beginning of something new. As Mia walked out of the restaurant that night, the cool breeze felt different against her skin. The same streets she had walked so many times before now felt full of possibility. She didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. Life had thrown her a curveball in the form of an iconic actor who had seen beyond her frustration and mistakes. And while she couldn't change the past, she could choose how to move forward. With Clint's note tucked safely in her pocket and his words etched in her mind, Mia stepped into the night, ready to see where her story would go next. And as the restaurant's lights dimmed behind her, one thing was certain: she wouldn't let the bad days win, not anymore.